The United States was not founded as a Christian nation. Professor Poutine here, Time for Mysteries, Histories. It continues to baffle me. A simple fourth grade reading of the lives of the founding fathers, Jefferson, Adams, Washington, Franklin, etc., would clearly indicate that as people of the Enlightenment, who were enamored of the Enlightenment philosophers, who read all of their works and who plagiarized their works, in fact, for their founding documents, the founding fathers were all deists. In other words, they believed in a supreme being who created the universe, but it wasn't a Christian God. It was a watchmaker. And like a watchmaker would create a watch, get it ticking, set it down, and move on to something else, they believed that was a relationship that God had with the earth. He simply created it and moved on. However, one of the most important things they realized was their view of religion was not everybody's view of religion. Muslims, Christians, Jews, Hindus, Sikhs, Buddhists, indigenous religions, they all believed and envisioned God in a different way, which is why one of the most important elements of the American Constitution and the founding documents was that government will make no laws infringing the freedom of religion. Anybody ever wondered why American currency says "in God we trust" and not "in Jesus Christ we trust"? Because God is a universal construct that applies to every religion as opposed to simply Christianity. And this is why the modern ultra-nationalist, right-wing, xenophobic Christianity that has taken hold at the federal level and in MAGA right-wing Republican circles is so baffling to me. And, really important thing to understand is that when we think about the historical Jesus didn't look like this. This view of Jesus, the traditional view with the long hair and the fancy clothes, comes from the Byzantine Empire, so the 4th century CE has nothing to do with the biblical view or any of the biblical accounts of the way Jesus looked or acted or talked or the clothes that he wore, etc., etc. Probably a more accurate view of what Jesus looked like is this. This is the face of an average Judean in the 1st century, made for a BBC documentary a few years ago, and in all likelihood, that's more like what the historical Jesus looked like. And this is what really gets my goat. When you think about this, if the historical Jesus were to show up today in Portland, poor, unemployed, an immigrant who doesn't speak the language of the government of the people, and most importantly, with the wrong color skin, what would ICE do with him? And how loudly would the right-wing, MAGA, ultra-xenophobic Christian nationalists, how loudly would they be cheering as this Jesus was zip-tied and vanished? Consider yourself updated.